Lockstep Technology Group. I am Ali Adib, and this is a closed beta project, the show where we talk to IT, cybersecurity experts, pioneers, and influencers about how we can live and grow in the digital age. Cool. All right, so let's begin.
Okay.
Thanks, Wes, for joining us. I have James Brown, and Wes Knight here. Can you guys do a little quick introduction about yourself, a little background? And I don't know who wants to go first. Actually, let's have our guest go first.
Okay. Well, this is my building, so you're a guest.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm Wes Knight. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer, Georgia Department of Revenue. I have been here a total of 12 years. Part of that as a contractor. I've been the CISO for 5. Great, it's a great job. I'm kind of backed into it. Didn't exactly come looking to be the CISO here. Actually started here. We were just talking about that a minute ago. Started here as the senior network security engineer, which is where I met James and his father. Was through that role. So we have a good team, and we are responsible for making sure, first off, that all the Georgia taxpayer data and motor vehicle information is safe, but also making sure that Department of Revenue and the employees adhere to all of their state and federal regulations that we have to adhere to. That sounded dumb. Anyway, I'm married. I've been married to my elementary school sweetheart for 46 years. Yeah, we went to 5th grade together. I've got 5 kids and 11 grandkids.
Congratulations.
And I'm getting ready to retire. Yay, me.
That's exciting. Are you looking forward to it? Or is
Yeah. I'm not going to be the couch potato. We were talking about this when you were getting set up a minute ago, but I'm working on a book. Hope to be done with that by end of the year. I'm expanding my conference speaking horizons a little bit and moving a little bit out of the information security realm and to talking more about just relationships and effective communications, which, that's not an information security issue. So that's really exciting. I'm also going to go back to teaching. So instructing maybe is a better word. I'm not going to work at a college, but I've got several companies that want me to teach classes for them, like certified CISO and some things like that. So,
like kind of consulting
and doing consulting, okay. Yeah,
cool.
And playing golf and shooting,
living it up.
Yeah,
awesome. James, do you mind? I mean, you and I have been talking about this, being on a podcast for several months now, and we finally made it happen. Can you give me a little intro for people to know you?
Absolutely. So James Brown, I'm account executive at Lockstep Technology Group. I have a pretty rich background in cybersecurity. As Wes has mentioned, we've known each other for several years, and I'm very blessed to have a mentor in my father that's also in the industry. That's really helped me kind of excel and give me a pretty good network, especially here in Atlanta with a lot of the CISO, some of the leaders in the industry.
So how did you guys meet exactly? How long ago was that? How long have you guys known each other?
I'll take a stab at that. So probably early mid-2000s.
Oh, wow.
There was a company I was working for. Ended up selling some product there into the Department of Revenue, firewalls and whatnot. I was actually working for my father at the time, funny enough. But yeah, I think that was the original.
That was it. And at the time, I was the senior network security engineer. I mentioned that a minute ago. That's how I started. Mm-hmm. And I think it was my first year here was when we made that move, brought y'all's stuff in and switched over. And it was quite a challenge.
And then through, Atlanta only has a couple cyber conferences. We've definitely been keeping up, running into each other pretty regularly.
That's brilliant. I mean, you mentioned a relationship that you want to transition into, and then you guys obviously have a very strong relationship for past, almost 20 years?
Well, 12 years.
12 years. Yeah. Wait, 2000. Oh, yeah, that's right. So that's very awesome. But let's kind of dive back, unpack the role of CISO. How is it different in a government or a SLED as opposed to a conventional CISO in like a business?
The wheels turn very slowly in the government. Basically, all the CISOs, we're all fighting the same problem. We're all using the same tools. We all have the same kind of issues. Like nobody, it's hard to find staff. That may be a little worse here because government, salaries are not quite up to the public sector. I think the cycle here is so long. I was talking to somebody the other day about a project we were kind of discussing, and it's like, okay, got to know that right now we are working on our budget request that's going to go to the legislature. When the legislature passes the budget, it goes into effect July of next year.
Oh, wow.
So if whatever project I'm thinking about isn't in that budget, we're talking about 2021 before I can get any budget money set aside. Now sometimes things work out differently, but that's generally what you always have in the back of your mind. It's just a long road, so you really have to look farther down the road maybe than somebody in a private sector spot.
I mean, I asked everyone so far is like, how do you future-proof your IT, which is kind of like an ironic question, but for you, I think you have to look 5 years ahead, if I would think.
You have to have at least a 3-year game plan, and which is really hard because stuff changes so much. I mean, the technology's advanced and this this new thing comes out or whatever, and you go, that's really cool, I like that, but it'll be 2 years before I can get it. And so I do go to a lot of innovation conferences where all the new stuff is showcased, because I think I have to, because I've got to keep updating that plan, and when somebody comes and says, so what kind of things do you need next year, I need to be ready with an answer.
That's brilliant. So what challenges do you have in the public sector or government sector as a SLED, as a CISO, that you wouldn't typically see in the private sector?
I think mostly it's the same stuff the private sector guys fight with. The only thing that hits us more frequently than would hit a private sector person is state legislation. The legislature meets, in Georgia here in January, February, March. They pass a bill. That bill goes into effect usually in July. Okay, so if they pass a bill that affects cybersecurity,
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of ramp at that point. The governor, a couple months ago, issued a executive order mandating that all state agencies, in the executive branch anyway, have at least 2 cycles of cybersecurity training a year, which absolutely, that's a wonderful thing. And in our case, we already had a really good product that we were rolling out for like 4 times a year. So we were, that wasn't that big of a deal for us. But some of the agencies, they weren't doing anything. So because GTA, which is the Georgia Technology Authority, that's kind of the overarching agency for most of the state. They put something together to help meet that need.
Yeah.
But if the governor had come out and issued a different order, or the legislature had passed something, then you end up really having a scramble. If something happens that affects a private company, it's a new federal mandate or something like that, you generally have a longer period of time to ramp up for it.
What do you think? I mean, you work with more private sector, am I right, than the SLED?
So historically, yeah, I've dealt with a lot of probably commercial or private sector accounts. I do have some experience there. Sitting from my side of the table,
Yeah.
what I will tell you is there are hurdles. A lot of times, when you're wanting to work with someone like Wes, usually you have to be an approved vendor.
Yes.
They have a list
Yeah.
to go on and do certain things, whether that be GTA or the state mandates, or rolls out saying, okay, these departments that may be higher at risk are going to do some assessments. Well, they have a subset of approved vendors already that they go into, and maybe it goes up to an RFP only to those groups.
Yeah.
So there are challenges from our side as well, obviously trying to work with them, because they can't just go out and work with any vendors that they want to. They have to be approved on the front end.
Yeah.
Department of Administrative Services keeps we just call it the contract. but it's a contract or a list of companies that already have contractual agreements with the state for approved products. And if I want to buy something off that contract list, that's relatively straightforward. If it's something that's not on that contract list, either that company didn't add it to their contract or the company's not even on the list, and that becomes a much bigger deal. It,
Okay.
it takes a lot longer to make that happen. You have to do RFPs and all kinds of stuff. So
Correct.
Cool. I want to talk about the post that you shared on LinkedIn
Sure.
yesterday about Johnson City School,
City.
municipal city, yeah,
Yeah.
getting hacked and then going through a ransomware.
Yeah, that was an interesting post. Obviously those are becoming a common thing.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of these cities. I mean, we're not even hearing about half of them probably. But there was a silver lining to that one, that they did make a pretty substantial investment lately to I guess it was a hyper-converged solution.
Yeah.
Which stopped some of the bleeding there. So it could have been significantly worse. And they actually went live with it 3 weeks prior. So,
timing.
good timing.
Yeah, absolutely. Tried to hit a moving target, it feels like. But it's just one of those stories, because you always see the press and you're like, okay, here we go again. How bad is it? And to read through it and say, you know what, they don't talk enough about the guys that are doing things right. So that was a good story.
What are your thoughts on that? Did they do the right thing with the convergence? Sorry.
I am not as familiar with that. I don't know that I can make a lot of comment about it. Just generically, the good guys always seem to be kind of behind the bad guys. They only got to get it right once. We got to be right all the time.
Yeah.
And state government, city governments have become a real target. There were a dozen the county cities in Florida that had been hit. You had 23 Texas agencies that were hit recently. Of course, you had City of Atlanta here, City of Hampton, I think, got hit.
Baltimore, yeah.
Baltimore. You had AOC, not the Congress lady. Administrative Office of the Courts got hit. Department of Public Safety got hit. That took out several other agencies along with it. It's just, we've just become like the fun punching bag for the bad guys. And sometimes I think that's nation state activity, and sometimes it's more organized crime. I guess is doing it.
So why do you think that is, that the SLED gets more attacked, or more, I wouldn't say vulnerable, or easier when you say punch bag than other private sector? Is it the legislation, the delay that takes for you guys to implement your strategies, or is it a different thing that you?
Well, I think that's a part of it. It sometimes we're slower with the solution, sometimes, but we're obviously much more public. I mean, everybody has heard of the City of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's heard of Bob's Taco Stand. And the other thing is, a lot of the state agencies and city agencies as well are smaller, and they don't have an information security staff. The CIO, if they have a CIO, does that, and a lot of times, even that part's outsourced. So there's not anybody in a lot of those agencies that is responsible for information security. And if there's no single person responsible for it, it makes you a better target, because things fall through the cracks.
Mm-hmm. So let's look at this example, the Johnson City. What did they do right, and what do you propose?
I'm not familiar with the Johnson City thing.
Oh, okay.
I didn't read about it yesterday, so
Okay.
I don't have any comment on that at all.
So what do you propose for other cities, or even just us, to prepare for like ransomware or any other attack?
You have to have a plan. You need policies that say, I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do this, and nobody that works for me is going to do this. I have a guy that works for me, and that's the major part of his job is just doing the policies and keeping them updated and stuff. So you have to have the policies. You have to have an incident response plan. You've got to know the incident response plan. When bad things happen, you've got to follow that plan. We're going to have tabletop here next Wednesday, right here at this table, where we're going to go through ours, and you have to do that periodically. So those are two like crucial parts of it. But at the same time, your biggest, and this is true, private sector, SLED, it doesn't matter. Your biggest weakness is the end user and what we call happy clickers. Now, at the same token, the end user can be your best firewall.
Mm-hmm.
So it can go either way. But the threat vector that I worry about the most is the clicker. And so you need end user training to teach them not to do that. You need some kind of anti-phishing testing and drilling, and we were talking about that a little while ago as well, to give us some practice and find out who are your happy clickers and give them a little remedial training if necessary. But then you've also got to have good programs, applications on the desktop, on the network, so somebody does click and it tries to drop payload, it'll catch it, or if it drops the payload and you miss that, then when it tries to phone home, you've got something that'll catch that. You've got to have layers. There's no silver bullet in this business. You know, you can hope for some silver BBs, but that's the best you get out of it. And I get my assurance, I sleep well at night because we have layers of things. Probably any company, most state agencies have got layers. If my EDR, my antivirus miss it, then I've got something behind that that's looking for what happens when it tries to move between machines. We call that lateral movement. Or what happens if it tries to go out on the internet to download more bad stuff or push out
Data.
the data. You've got to be watching all the egress points. You just have to keep an eye on that. And you've got to keep the stuff tuned, or you've got to have some kind of correlation engine that helps weed out all the white noise. Because the guys in a SOC out there, just go nuts if they have to deal with 10,000 things a day, and only 100 of them or only 5 of them mean anything. They got to weed through all the other junk, and it's really difficult on the level 1 SOC analyst people, and just trying to sort that out. So you kind of need something at that level as well.
Okay, James, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
It reflects to what Wes says. I mean, there is, to his point, to use the same quote, there is no silver bullet there. If I was talking to a small city government, that was starting from, how do we protect ourselves from, I would say it's just, do not go off and buy a bunch of products or anything else right now. This is rolling up your sleeves and getting to the hard work. Doing your posture assessments, making sure your policies are in place, get an incident response plan, and executing it, practicing it, and just understand. You got to be doing the things that are important: the monitoring, making sure the safeguards are up. The old days of bigger wall, deeper moat are no longer protecting businesses.
Stuff's way too mobile now.
Right.
Yeah.
And what he said was, I agree with that 100% too. That having an outside, it's great to do your own risk assessments. Mm-hmm. But if I was starting from scratch today, first thing I would want to do is have a third party come in and do not a risk assessment, but a maturity assessment.
Sure.
And that may involve to a degree a risk assessment. We had a company come in right after the South Carolina revenue incident happened 7-8 years ago. You never want to let a good crisis go to waste, right? So when that bad thing happened to them, it was a good thing for us because it got us attention. And we were able to have an outside company come in and do a network assessment, a vulnerability assessment, and a different company came in and did a security maturity assessment for us. And so we got a good idea of where our weaknesses were from a technical perspective, but also where things were from a policies, procedures, training perspective. So we kind of got both of them pretty much at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it enabled us to make a really solid foundation that we could then build the Office of Information Security on top of.
No, that's brilliant. I want to piggyback on that, but before I do, can I have your mic a little closer to you?
Sure, absolutely.
Sorry, I want to make sure I get you. So what is the difference between risk assessment and a maturity assessment?
Well, risk assessment is generally based on some standard like, NIST 800. When we do a risk assessment, we use NIST 800. It's very detailed. There's a lot of stuff you got to look at, but it tells you or helps you identify where your vulnerabilities are. You have unpatched machines. You have bad policy on this issue. Those types of things. Maybe policy is the wrong word to use there, but you've got issues that need to be resolved to improve the security posture of that system, and that's generally done per system. And we run multiple systems here, so we run multiple risk assessments. Coming out of a risk assessment, you come out with a POAM, a plan of action as a milestone to remediate those things. A maturity assessment is not system or application related, it's more people related. So do you have policies that do this? Do you follow those policies? CMMI has a grading from 1 to 5, and a lot of it has to do with reactive. If you're starting off an information security program and you're a 1 or a 2, you react to everything. There's no, you don't do anything proactively. You don't plan things because the house is on fire and the only thing you can do is jump at the fire out. Mm-hmm. Proactive, you're putting in smoke detectors and fire extinguishers and all that kind of stuff. You're anticipating what might happen, and you're taking steps today to resolve an issue that might happen tomorrow. Part of that's in your reporting, your correlation of events, automation where possible. But it's really a matter of the risk assessments are generally system related or application related, whereas a maturity assessment is more about the people, processes, guidelines, standards, those types of things.
Brilliant. I want to jump to the next topic here, which is why CISO? Why people need it? You mentioned the lack of staffing, or a lot of companies don't even have that. Why do you think it's so important that almost everyone should have it?
Well, whether it's a CISO or an ISO or a director of information security, or I don't care what you call the guy or lady. We have a lot. Actually, we have a fair in Atlanta. We have a fair number of lady CISOs.
Awesome.
But you need somebody that's the responsible person. Somebody who's gonna again take that long view, the proactive view, as opposed to just trying to put the fires out. And in some organizations, the ISO is, dual-hatted, use a military term. I originally, when I became the ISO, I was also the network manager. And so I ran the network and did the information security. And we did make a case here that information security was important enough that it needed to be, I just needed one hat. Mm-hmm. So the infrastructure guy, the guy that had the servers and stuff, took over networking.
When was that? What year was that?
That was probably 7 years ago.
Oh wow!
Something
okay,
like that. It's been a while.
All right.
And then you focus on information security. There's enough in the information security bucket to keep you busy. Mm-hmm. And I don't care, if you're a small agency or a big agency or a company, or it doesn't matter. There's enough going on in information security that you it's better if you have somebody that's all they do. Now, if you're a small group and you don't have that kind of staff and you have to have a multi-hatted person, okay, you use what you got. But somebody has got to be the person that you go to when you have an information security thing. Whether it's, crap, I clicked on that. I didn't mean to, what do I do now? Or somebody to help train the people not to do that.
Yeah.
But somebody's got to be responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Accountable is a better word than responsible, probably, in that scenario. But especially if you get into medium, large businesses and medium and larger agencies, it becomes even more crucial. Because, again, the bigger you get, the more likely is somebody's going to be aware of you. Mm-hmm. But there are enough tools the bad guys use out there to just scan the internet that we used to talk about security through obscurity. there's no obscurity anymore. They're going to find you. And I'm not even going to mention any of the tools, but some of the tools they can use, they just scan the internet looking for particular vulnerabilities, particular ports that are open, or particular names. I had a guy call me one day, and he had used one of those tools, and it was scanning for something related to DOR here in Georgia, and had found something on the network that he didn't think should have been on the network, and he contacted me. If he was in California, contacted me from California, and allowed me to look into it. But he could have been a bad guy, and he could have used that to try to attack us. So you really need somebody, and that's, again, whether it's a CISO or an ISO or whatever, the name I don't think is that big of a deal, except for one thing, is they need they need to be high enough in the organization where they can impact things. There's a thing with the CISOs today, talk about having a seat on the board or a voice on the board, those types of things, and those are good. But what's actually more important is if you have an ear on the board, if you've got somebody who will listen to you. That's more important to me than having a seat on the board or having, being able to present regularly to the board, those types of things. If you've got somebody that you can talk to on the board that'll listen to you, that can influence the board, that's more important.
So James, how do you think people, the CISOs or the small IT departments, can approach the C-level execs to, one, convince them that they need a standalone department for a cybersecurity, and then two, to Wes's point, how do you find the influence on the board? I know those are like very loaded questions.
Yeah, that's tough. Some smaller organizations are going to do things the way they've always done. I think there's enough free press out there right now with all the different breaches that have happened over the last 4 or 5 years. No one believes it's going to happen to them until it happens to them.
It's like having your house broken into.
Right, exactly right. But, I do feel, whether it's an individual, to his point earlier, even if it's some shared responsibility, organizations should have a dedicated resource, someone that can handle, when incidents happen. More organizations are now having to deal with third-party assessments or engagements or whatever they might be. Just an individual that can actually come in, help manage those processes, so you're not having to do a fire drill every year.
Yeah. There's enough regulations, whether they're not regulation, but like PCI. So if you're a company and you do credit card transactions, you probably have to comply at some level with PCI regulations. Okay, you're a hospital, you got HIPAA or high tech, you have to worry about. Maybe you have to do a SOC 2 assessment. There's all kind of either rules, regulations, or customer or pressure. Like, oh, you want me to invest $1 million for you? I'd like to see your security stuff. So there's pressure from that right. I think personally, most that in, I don't know, like in the next year or so, but in the next, say, 5 years, that there's going to be federal regulation that is going to require, above a certain level, all the boards to have a CISO type person on the board. Like today, you have to have a CFO type person. Okay, that's somebody that understands the finances.
Yeah,
I think in a few more years, there's enough of this stuff going on today, I don't even want to start down that list, but of all these large mega companies that have had breaches, that sooner or later somebody at the federal level, whether it's legislation or whether it's just some rule they pass in some agency up there, that they're going to end up having to have somebody on the board who has an information security background. I really truly believe that's coming.
I believe so too. I think kind of mimicking what the EU is doing over there with GDPR, and they're mandating a data privacy officer. You're going to start seeing more and more legislation pushed down. You're seeing it here in the States, some of the privacy acts. You're seeing security up in New York and some of the other ones. So,
do you think the fine or the penalty is going to be as high as it is in Europe? I mean, I haven't seen it yet, but
they're really heavy-handed on that stuff in Europe.
Yeah,
I mean, if they that's a huge chunk of money they're talking about.
Do you think
I
that
don't
would-
know that we'll see that here.
Do you think is that a con or a pro having such a penalty that kind of second guesses the companies to like be more, as you said, proactive and protecting the data of the customers and even employees? Or do you think that doesn't really matter? It's just a matter of responsibility.
Well, it's responsibility. It could be a pro or a con. When you've got that kind of heavy fine, now I don't know about the people in Europe that are doing this, but in a lot of cases, if the fine is that heavy, people are a little less likely to invoke it because it could be so catastrophic. If it was a smaller fine, you probably see more of them. So I don't know. I guess it could be a pro or a con.
Okay.
Yeah, I think HIPAA's, you've seen it from OCR and some of the other ones. They've rolled out some fines for some of the healthcare breaches and whatnot. But the question is, are they going to have a standardized one for security? And how are they going to enforce that? Is it going to be, a enormous cash grab similar to what we see out of the EU, or is it going to be something more maintainable that does, make people fall in line for it?
I mean, you mentioned earlier the legislation takes time to implement. Do you think that coming up with something like that for security will take a long time to be able to monitor and implement and enforce?
I think it takes a long time for the adjustment for organizations. GDPR was a date that all the companies have seen, and everybody took a while. What is it going to mean? What's going to happen to me? They really want to see somebody else get penalized first, I think, before you see the whole wave of everybody. I mean, you're seeing new legislation, whether it's industry focused, state mandated. It's coming up fairly regularly. The question is, how much is it enforced? They usually give you like 12, 18 months when they announce it's coming out, and then all of a sudden the teeth of it starts going in, at a certain cutoff date where you have to comply with it. It just really depends on what's in it and what the penalties are.
Is that enough time, 12 to 18 months, to get yourself compliant, in your opinion, especially for SLED?
The standard answer would be it depends. How draconian is the legislation? How detailed is it? Here, again, depending upon what the legislation was, if it was something where I ended up having to ask for money, well, they don't really have there's no drawer here. Even though it's Department of Revenue, there's no drawer full of money around here. So we've got to go to the legislature. We've got to go to the office, OPB, down at the governor's office to request additional funds or supplemental budget or something like that. And I don't think we're any different than probably another government agency. There's not despite what people talk about, there's really no slush fund in a drawer someplace. So you've got to go someplace to get the money.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can take a while. So, but I think 18 months. It's probably doable.
Okay.
We could make an initial request. We think we're going to need this much money. We could spend the time while the request is being worked to try to figure out a game plan and what we need. We need more people. We need more tools. What do we need? And or maybe it's a matter we already have all the stuff we need. It's just a matter of tweaking everything into place. We got hit at one point recently. We don't exactly handle credit cards. We can use a credit card with Department of Revenue to pay your tag with it or something. We don't. That's not really us. That go online and update your buy a new sticker for your tag. As soon as you say you want to use a credit card, that goes to a different website. That's not us. But our card processor, because we were doing so much volume, our card processor a couple of years ago came to us and started talking about us being PCI compliant.
Oh, wow.
And you stop and look at that and go, well, okay, then first you got to do an assessment, find out where you're weak. What do we tweak? What do we have to buy something? Do we have, what do we do? And in that case, we were able to accomplish that fairly quickly. We weren't off but in a couple of places from being compliant without knowing it, basically. And so we made those tweaks and kind of readjusted ourselves. But if we'd been way off, then that'd been a problem. And it's going to be the same thing with whatever legislation ends up passing or new regulations that come out. If a company's way off, 18 months isn't going to be enough time.
Okay. I want to talk about the CISO and CIO relationship. How do you approach that? I mean, obviously, relationship building is your expertise. Both of you, just kind of like both questions for both of you. How do you go about building that relationship, and what's an ideal scenario for the both positions to be working together?
To a degree, it depends on the structure of the company. Like here, information security is under IT. And so we report up to the CIO. That's true in a lot of companies. Sometimes the CISO is a peer of the CIO. Sometimes he reports to the CFO or the GC, or it just depends. But regardless of all that, the CISO and the CIO, you've got to have a relationship there. You cannot be adversaries. You have to be working toward the same goal, which is meeting the business needs in a secure fashion. IT, if you go back 20 years ago, IT was viewed as the Department of No, because the business thought that the only thing IT did was get in their way. In reality, IT is an enabler. Look at all the stuff we do today. You couldn't do that without IT. You couldn't do that without a good IT structure. Well, unfortunately, that mantle of the Department of No shifted from the CIO to the CISO. And he became the Department of No. He's the guy that you go to have your dreams killed, And one of the things that I've tried to do, and I counsel, coach my peers and other agencies to do, is build those relationships with the CIO, specifically to your question, but also with the business units.
Okay.
And find out what they're trying to do. What's the CIO do? What's your game plan for the next 3 years? And how can I help you do that? Mr. Business Unit person, here those are called directors. So I go to one of the directors and sit down with Rod or somebody, and I say, so what are you trying to do over the next 2 or 3 years? What can I do to help you do that? I don't want to be the Department of No. I don't want to be the guy who says no to everything. I want to be the guy that helps you accomplish your mission and your objectives in a secure fashion. But I got to know what those are. And if I don't have a relationship with the guys, I'm not going to know that. Part of that, one of the other people you're going to be really good buddies with is whoever is in charge of your PMO, the project management office. So if a business unit takes a project to the PMO here, somebody in the PMO will call me and say, hey, do you know about this? Because if I can get involved in the initiation meeting, it may only take a small nudge to get this thing the way it needs to be. If you come to me the day before the project's going to go to live and ask for an authority to operate, I don't have any choice but say no. And so that's a big transition, moving from the Department of No to the enabler. But that's critically important, and it's critically important here and everywhere else. And I got off of the CIO a little bit, but that relationship, that's the same kind of thing. What I do, because I report up through that guy, is I want to make him successful. By making him successful, it's going to make me successful in the department, and we're all going to come out of this thing better. So,
what do you think, James?
I think he's spot on. I think most organizations, you're not going to find, like a cookie cutter tiered, the CISO reports to the CIO, which reports to, I think it's all over the place. CISO can report to the board, to the general counsel, to the CIO, to the CEO, to the CFO. But, to his point, they've got to have a good working relationship. They got to be in sync on looking at the data, protecting it, or the assets, whatever it might be, making sure they're not fighting over things like budget or, whatever it might be, but the relationship's imperative.
Awesome. Did you have anything else you want to add that we did not cover today? You want to talk about? Or you, James?
I will say that several of the questions that you've asked are in my book.
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
I get a plug in here at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Well, I'm still working on it. Should be done in November. The working title is Think Like a Billionaire, like a $1 billion CISO. I'm not sure that's going to be the final, but that's kind of what we're working with right now.
When can we look forward to?
Well, I'm hoping to be done by end of the year with
Cool.
it, and then of course it should be published shortly after that.
Oh, brilliant.
So, call me. I'll autograph a copy for you. But,
Brilliant. I'm looking forward to it.
yeah, and a lot of things that I said are things that are in the book. About the relationships with the CIO and the business unit, and being able to communicate. One of the problems I think that CISOs have, we tend to be technical people. CIOs have the same kind of issue. They were technical people, and now you're talking to a business person. You might as well be talking Italian or something. Business people are not stupid. They wouldn't be where they are if they were stupid. But they're business people. They're not tech heads. And you start talking bits and bytes and ones and zeros to them, and they just, their eyes glaze over. One of the differences between a CIO, I think, and an ISO or a security analyst type thing is the CISO has got to be able to take the security issues, whether they're good things or bad things, concerns or whatever, and present them to the business as a business issue. Like, they don't care about Pacheco or not Pacheco and all that kind of stuff, but they do care about how it's going to impact their business when 2/3 of their computers go down. And that's how a CISO has to talk. They have to talk to them about this is how this is going to impact your business if this goes bad. But on the other side, and we don't do nearly enough of this is how information security can help you guys improve productivity and make more money for your business unit so you can get your bonus this year. It seems like all the CIS, all you ever talk about is, oh my God, the sky's falling, and there's another element to that. Like VPNs are a security issue. How many people that listen to this podcast telework? Whether they do it all the time or once in a while, you couldn't do that if you didn't have the technology, and that's an IT thing and an information security thing. All those types of things, those can be enablers, not roadblocks. And again, I think CISOs, ISOs need to spend more time on that side, talking about that piece of it as opposed to fussing around because we had to, shut something down because it violated some rule.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Great.
I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
And looking forward to for your book.
Me too.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Thank you for listening to Closed Beta Project. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please review, like, and share with your friends and colleagues. The Closed Beta Project is produced and hosted by me. If you have any questions, please visit our website at lockstepgroup.com. Until the next episode, have a great week.